Good day, Crime Talk aficionados. My name is Scott Reisch, and this is Crime Talk, the most fact-driven, unbiased true crime channel on the internet. We have another busy docket to get started. We hope everyone had a wonderful Thanksgiving. First on the docket, rules for thee, but not for me. Second, the Manson family members denied parole yet again at age 71. Third, a Nebraska man gives us a perfect example to explain criminal mischief. Fourth, the government doesn't want Steve Bannon's current attorneys to get off the case until some new ones come on. I'll explain. Fifth, the United States Supreme Court schools Governor Cuomo on fundamental rights. And finally, our dumb criminal contestant of the day. Let's talk about it. Good day, Crime Talk aficionados. This is Crime Talk. My name is Scott Reisch. Thanks for watching. I hope you all had a wonderful Thanksgiving. First, if you haven't done so already, we'd ask that you hit that subscribe button. If you haven't done so already, also hit that little bell so that you receive notifications of when we go live or put up new content. And we will go live tomorrow at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. And as always, please leave me a comment below. Now, first on the docket, this has something to do with what we talk about. Yes, although we talk about true crime, we also talk about the Constitution. What is necessary about the Constitution? Well, we need public officials, right? We need public officials that are in the legislative branch, and we need officials in the executive branch. We also have public officials in the judicial branch, but today we're just going to talk about legislators and the executive branch. That's right. Rules for thee, but not for me. I have said this before repeatedly. If you are a public official, that's right, elected to some sort of office or appointed like a judge should be, that you should have to be held to a much higher standard than all of the unwashed everyday people out here in America. Why? Because they, the public officials, are the ones creating laws and enforcing laws. And when you do that, you have to do it better and cleaner than the next guy. And guess what? If you can't live up to that standard, you need to go away. You need to resign. Now, what comes to mind? Obviously, you can recall House Speaker Nancy Pelosi getting her hair done out there in San Francisco. And guess what? How did that information come about? Somebody was so upset that this public official that's telling everybody to stay home and quarantine, but she needs to get her due done. That's right. Somebody videotaped that or turned over the security camera footage showing Nancy Pelosi ignoring the rules and regulations that have been put in place because she thought she was special. That's right. Rules for thee, but not for me. Which means you all need to follow the law, but not for me. I'm exempt. I'm a public official. Then we also had recently Governor Gavin Newsom. You may recall that he apologized because he was going to go to a coworker's birthday party at some fancy French restaurant called the French Laundry. And what happened in that particular case? Well, let's just say there was no social distancing, and additionally, there were no masks going on. Now, you can remember Gavin Newsom has repeatedly told the people of the great state of California not to go anywhere because you're going to die. But if you got to go, make sure you social distance and make sure you wear a mask. Gavin Newsom, guess what? Was called out for it. Why? Because somebody at that restaurant took a video, took pictures of the good governor, completely ignoring all the rules that he wants to impose upon the people of the great state of California, but not him. That's right. Called complete and total hypocrisy. Now, we are all hypocrites. It's just a matter of degree. But when you are a public servant in public office telling people how to live and affecting hundreds of thousands, if not millions of businesses and millions of people's lives, guess what? You need to hold yourself to that standard that you're holding everyone else to. And if you can't do it, resign. Gavin Newsom, you gotta go. Pelosi, you gotta go. Now, you may have heard about it a couple of weeks ago. An organization was going to hold an educational get-together for some 50 legislators from both the state of California. There were some from Texas and a smattering of them all over the country. Now, we're not even going to get into the ethics laws regarding this, since the lobbyist that was there to educate the legislators basically was giving the legislators a free, all expense paid trip to Hawaii so that they could have this educational experience and talk about elections. And the average cost per legislator was some $5,000, of course, not including a family member that may have accompanied them as well. You would think that these legislators, if they're so interested in this educational opportunity, would pay out of their own pocket because this was of such great importance. Somehow I think the basically free trip to Hawaii was more important than learning about elections. Now, let's not forget, and hopefully everyone knows about the mayor of the city and county of Denver here in the state of Colorado. That's right, our mayor, Michael Hancock. Now, this guy is a complete piece of work, okay? He's basically a career politician. He's now in his third and final term as the mayor of the city and county of Denver. Now, just last week, he held a press conference with our governor, Jared Polis. And at this joint news conference, first the governor spoke saying, everybody, make sure you get that small turkey because you should only have people from the same household over for Thanksgiving. And if you don't do that, basically, you're a horrible person and you're going to kill everybody you come in contact with. Then Mayor Michael Hancock got up and did the exact same thing, spoke, said, take the small turkey. I know it's hard. I know it's rough, but we got to do this. We got to flatten the curve. All the rhetoric that we hear from politicians every day. Well, guess what? On the day before Thanksgiving, guess what? He was caught boarding a flight to Houston and ultimately to Mississippi so that he could spend Thanksgiving with his wife and his daughter. Now, what is even more hypocritical about that is the fact that, yes, the day before, he had told everybody to stay at home. And what's even more ironic is the governor, who shared the podium with the mayor, tested positive for coronavirus. Now, certainly we wish the governor a speedy recovery, and we hope he and his partner, his husband, are well. But the hypocrisy of Mayor Hancock needs to be called out. Further, about 30 minutes before Hancock's flight departed, he tweeted, "Avoid travel if you can in order to slow the spread of COVID-19. He sent out another tweet and as well as on Facebook saying, "Pass the potatoes, not the COVID. Stay at home as much as you can, especially if you're sick. Host virtual gatherings instead of in-person dinners. Avoid travel and order your holiday meal from a local eatery. Shop online for small businesses." Wow. So guess what? Mayor Hancock, urging everybody to do that, does the complete opposite. Now, what does Mayor Hancock do? He apologizes because us, the people of the state of Colorado and all everywhere around, you're too stupid to realize that this is hypocrisy to the nth degree. He says, I'll just issue an apology saying, I was thinking with my heart and as a father to be with my daughter on Thanksgiving and to be with my wife. And it was less risky for me to travel than to have my wife and my daughter to come home. Well, let's talk about some of Mayor Hancock's other apologies. How about when the city and county of Denver paid off a member of his security detail for sexually suggestive text messages that he had sent to this female police officer who was assigned to his security detail? That's right, he apologized. And how about that time where his son got pulled over by an Aurora police officer and berated the police officer and stated, "You don't know who you're dealing with. My dad is a mayor in the city and county of Denver. He will have your job." That's right. Mayor Hancock apologized. And how about that time at the first election with Mayor Hancock when he was found to have numbers involved with the Player and Sugars case, which was a prostitution ring that was busted that had a lot of high-ranking officials here in town, and they just happened to have his phone number and his name in the book. What did he do? Well, of course, first he denied, and then he apologized. So that is Mayor Hancock's MO, just like a lot of politicians. Rules for thee, that's right, you and me, but not for me, the politician. And if you get caught, well, just apologize, it'll blow over. Well, I think it's about time that things stop just getting blown over. I would urge each and every one of you to contact Mayor Hancock's office at 720-865-9000. Now, be polite. We don't need to call him names. We don't need to make any threats. Don't do that. Just simply say, guess what, Mayor Hancock, I think that you should resign because you're a hypocrite. That's all you have to say, and hopefully they'll know that people are tired of the hypocrisy of public officials. And guess what, ladies and gentlemen? This hypocrisy would not be called out but for people like you and me who have that information and give it to the press. Otherwise, they think they will continually be able to get away with it. So if you have information regarding public officials that are being completely hypocritical of the position that they're telling everybody in public and they're doing the opposite, I urge you to contact the news media so hopefully somebody will run with it. And if you have a tip, you can always send it to me here, Scott@ScottReisch.com, and we'll take a look at it. And if we can verify it, guess what? We'll talk about it. And the reason why I say to do this, ladies and gentlemen, is these politicians are making policies that are affecting businesses, families, people that are on the verge of losing everything, people that have made decisions that have shut basically the restaurant industry down across the country the week of Thanksgiving, and they're probably not going to open up again until after the first of the year. This affects people. These politicians don't care because they get their paycheck twice a month, whether they need it or not. And I don't see any of them donating their paychecks to take care of the people that actually work for a living and have a family to support. That's why I'm so fired up about this issue. Next on the docket, the Manson family. That's right. There's still a couple of them that 50 years later are still in custody serving their life sentences. Well, guess what? On Friday, Governor Gavin Newsom in the great state of California refused to grant parole to Leslie Van Houten, who was one of the convicted Charles Manson cult followers. And this is now the fourth time in 4 years. Governor Newsom refused Van Houten's parole after the state's parole board made the recommendation for the 71-year-old woman in January. Newsom stated via a press release that he believes that Van Houten currently possesses an unreasonable danger to society if released from prison at this time. Given the extreme nature of the crime in which she was involved, I do not believe she has sufficiently demonstrated that she has come to terms with the totality of the factors that led her to participate in the vicious Manson family killings. I don't know what to do about this. I don't know if Miss Van Houten has been rehabilitated some 50 years later, but she's 71 years old and she looks like she could be someone's grandma. Somehow I imagine she's probably been deprogrammed from the Manson cult following. And obviously, when one goes before the parole board, you have to accept responsibility, show remorse and contrition for what you have done. Apparently, the parole board says, let's give her a shot. Gavin Newsom, who it is ironic, who thinks that basically no one should ever be given a bond or even have to go to prison. But yet this is a high-profile case that still some 50 years later after a crime was committed says that she is unsafe. I don't know. A life sentence, should it mean a life sentence, or should you be able to get parole after a period of time? Obviously, it depends on the state. Let me know in the comments whether you think that she should be paroled. A Nebraska man gives us an example of criminal mischief. Please meet this man, Mr. Andrew Marr. Now, he thought that he was missing his drug pipe. That's right. The pipe that people use to smoke like crack and methamphetamines. Well, apparently he went on a rampage at the Super Saver store because he thought it was gone. Maybe someone, in fact, had taken it. This little rampage started in the store, continued on into the parking lot. Mr. Marr allegedly caused some $7,000 worth of damage. Now, he wreaked this havoc in the Lincoln, Nebraska store because he believed someone had stolen his dope pipe. He destroyed a metal detector, a computer, 25 bottles of wine, as well as damaged parked cars in his little temper tantrum. The ironic thing is that guess where they found the pipe? That's right, they being the police, they found it in his pocket. Now, this gives us a classic example of criminal mischief, all right? If you break the property of another person and cause damage to that property, that is criminal mischief. It may be called different things throughout the United States, but if you damage another person's property, most jurisdictions refer to it as criminal mischief. There's no real defense to criminal mischief because it's not like the property is attacking you. They just simply have to prove that it was the defendant, right? The elements that the defendant, not somebody that looked like him, not someone using an identity, but him, the defendant, and in this particular case, Mr. Marr, damaged the property of another person without legal permission or justification. Bottom line, can't think of any legal permission or justification in this particular case. Certainly, Mr. Marr will hopefully be able to come up with the $7,000 to make the Super Saver whole again, but I'm going to go on a limb and think somehow he will not be able to pay. But thank you, Mr. Marr. You gave us a perfect example of criminal mischief. Before we go on with the docket, let's take a quick recess. Now, do you think if you were ever going to get involved with Mr. Marr, even if, say, he cleaned up his act, maybe you'd want to know exactly what was out there because maybe he doesn't remember it or he's not being truthful? That's why you need to go to CrimeTalkSearch.com, sign up for a background subscription service. I'm telling you, we have received more testimonials from people saying, I was going to get involved with somebody that I met online, and you would not believe what showed up. And where did they find it? With our background search at CrimeTalkSearch.com. Yes, there is a small nominal fee, but when you pay that fee, guess what? You can search as many people as you would like, and you do it completely anonymously. And when you get that report that literally searches millions and millions of records around the United States, something that would take you months, if not years to complete if you were to try to do it on your own, there is a report that is generated. And in that report, you're going to get information regarding criminal history, arrests, any sort of sex offender registration. Are they a felon? You're going to get information regarding bankruptcies, property records, marital and divorce records, and you'll also get a section regarding social media, emails, and telephone numbers associated with this particular individual that you search. Why is that important? Because those emails are going to show up and you're going to say, well, he's only given me one email, but why does he have four? Perhaps those are all the other online dating accounts that he goes under. Perhaps. Maybe it's completely innocent, but there's only one way to find out. Go to CrimeTalkSearch.com and get your background subscription service today. Next on the docket, Steve Bannon, right? Remember him? He is a former hedge fund guy. I think he worked at, Goldman Sachs at one time, made a lot of money. Then he was an advisor to the Trump campaign in the first election. Well, apparently he got involved in a private group regarding raising money to fund the wall between the U.S. and Mexico. Well, guess what? Mr. Bannon, along with some compatriots, got indicted for some mismanagement of the money, which is a good rule of thumb. Don't take other people's money, and if you do, you hold it in trust, and you only use it for what you're authorized to do it for. Now, obviously, we give Mr. Bannon the presumption of innocence, but needless to say, Mr. Bannon provides another good example of the court system. Mr. Bannon's attorneys want to withdraw from the case, and they have to file a notice, all right? When an attorney enters his appearance on the case, he can't get off the case unless and until the court grants permission to do so. Now, can the court make you work for free? No, they can't. But let's face it, the court's going to wonder why you didn't get at least the majority of your money up front. Now, sometimes you just have irreconcilable differences. Because I'm not saying Mr. Bannon is not paying his attorney's fees. I think he has plenty of money to pay any attorney fees that come out. But if, let's say, there's irreconcilable differences where you just have not a good working relationship with a client, once again, you can file a motion to withdraw and say, Judge, we just have irreconcilable differences. Normally, the judge will kind of get it, and the court will allow you to get off the case. Another example of when an attorney wants to get off a case is if they have an ethical conflict, where, let's say, for example, it comes out that some witness, unbeknownst to nobody at the time that you got on the case, maybe was your old client. Well, that's an ethical conflict. You can't keep those confidences and use them to the detriment or not use them as it relates to your new client. So you'd have to get off. And obviously the ultimate reason why most people get off cases is the defendant simply stops paying. And in those type of circumstances, you have to say, hey, judge, the defendant has failed to follow the written terms of a fee agreement. The judge gets it, but they don't like it. But most courts are not going to make you work for free. Now, they could. I can tell you, I've entered on cases where the court has said, I think your client is playing games by getting on and off attorneys. You are the last attorney there, Mr. Reich, so I hope you got paid in full up front because we're going to trial. So in Mr. Bannon's case, his attorneys would like to get off the case. The prosecution doesn't necessarily object, but now in his case, they filed a letter saying, Judge, don't let the existing attorneys off the case because there's no ethical conflict, and to simply wait for a new attorney to come on. So the United States government has filed an objection saying, Judge, please don't let Mr. Bannon's attorneys off just yet unless and until new counsel enters on the case. And oh, by the way, they should be prepared to go to trial rather quickly. Now, needless to say, any new attorney would be granted a limited time to get up to speed on the issues, to review the discovery, to analyze and engage in any motions practice that needs to be done. And that may be one of the reasons for the differences between Mr. Bannon and his current counsel. We'll watch that to see if Mr. Bannon gets new counsel. I can only imagine that Mr. Bannon would be a difficult client, but everyone, including difficult clients, are entitled to the counsel of their choice. Let me know. Do you think Mr. Bannon's playing games, or maybe he just doesn't like his current attorneys? Let me know. Next on the docket, the United States Supreme Court schools Governor Cuomo and the state of New York on their COVID-related attendance limits on worship services. Now, I don't know for any of you out there, but one of the things, if it comes on the news, that I simply have to change the channel is to listen to Governor Cuomo. I simply cannot listen to his voice. I think it's condescending. There's everything about it. It's like running your hands down a blackboard. And for the younger audience who's never had a blackboard, you'll just have to work with me on this. It's terrible. Anyway, so Governor Cuomo gives his daily briefings, and he tells everybody who can make a living and who cannot, who can participate in religious services and who cannot, based upon certain numbers and various color codes that are constantly ever changing. The United States Supreme Court granted requests from the Roman Catholic Diocese of Brooklyn and 2 Orthodox Jewish synagogues to block enforcement of New York executive order restricting attendance at houses of worship. Both the diocese and the synagogue claim that the executive orders violated the right to the free exercise of religion, which is guaranteed under the First Amendment to the United States Constitution, particularly when secular businesses in the area are allowed to remain open. Now, Wednesday's orders by a closely divided Supreme Court, which had turned down 2 similar requests over the summer by churches in California and Nevada, represented a clear shift of the court since Justice Amy Coney Barrett replaced Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who died in September. The 5 conservative justices, Clarence Thomas, Samuel Alito, Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, and Barrett, sided with the religious groups and blocked the attendance limits. Chief Justice John Roberts, along with the Justices Stephen Breyer, Sonia Sotomayor, and Elena Kagan, dissented. Now, by way of background, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo issued the executive order at the center of both disputes in October as part of the state's effort to combat COVID-19. The executive order and the initiative that it implements identify clusters of COVID-19 cases and take action to prevent the virus from spreading. An area immediately around a cluster is known as a red zone, where attendance at worship services is limited to 10 people. The area around a red zone is known as an orange zone. Attendance at worship services there is limited to 25 people. Yellow zones surround orange zones. Attendance there is limited to 50% of the building's maximum capacity. Now, the diocese went to the United States Supreme Court on November 12th, asking the justices to block the attendance limits after the lower courts declined to do so. It told the Supreme Court that as a practical matter, the order effectively bars in-person worship at affected churches, a devastating and spiritually harmful burden on the Catholic community. The synagogues followed on November 16th. They stressed that although they have complied with previous COVID-19 rules, the restrictions imposed by Governor Cuomo's orders preclude them from conducting services for all of their congregants, and they argued that Cuomo's order targeted Orthodox Jewish communities because the other Orthodox Jews had not complied with the rules. Cuomo pushed back last week, responding that the restrictions on attendance no longer apply to the churches and synagogues, which are in an area that are now designated as yellow zones. But in any event, Cuomo told the justices that the order isn't focused on gatherings because they're religious, but because of the possibility that they could be super spreader events. If anything, Cuomo added, the order treats religious gatherings more favorably than secular events such as plays and concerts that involve similar risks. Now, in an unsigned opinion in the Catholic diocese case that applied to the synagogue case, the 5-member majority blocked the state from enforcing the attendance limits while the challenges continue to litigate the issue at the U.S. Court of Appeals of the Second Circuit, and if necessary, return to the Supreme Court for a final decision on the merits. The court explained that Cuomo's orders does not appear to be neutral, but instead singles out houses of worship for especially harsh treatment. For example, although the synagogue or a church is a red zone is limited to 10 people at a service, there are no limits on how many people a nearby essential business, which can include acupuncture or a campground, can admit. And because the Cuomo order is not neutral, the court continued, it is subject to the most stringent constitutional test known as strict scrutiny. The court said it fails that test. The court concluded because the order is too broad. There is no evidence that these synagogues and churches have contributed to outbreaks and other less restrictive rules which could have been employed instead, such as basing the maximum attendance on the size of the facility. And if the restrictions are enforced, the court added, they will result in permanent harm to people who cannot attend and for whom a live streaming of service is not an adequate substitute. A couple of key quotes out of these very short opinions. First one comes from Justice Gorsuch, who filed a short separate opinion in which he emphasized, quote, even if the Constitution has taken a holiday during the pandemic, it cannot become a sabbatical. Now, Justice Kavanaugh filed his own opinion, stressing that Wednesday's ruling from the court is only a temporary one until the Second Circuit, which is scheduled to hear argument on the dispute next month, can act on the case, followed, if necessary, by a decision on the merits by the justices. Kavanaugh also pushed back on a point at the heart of the dissent filed by Chief Justice Roberts, who acknowledged that the restrictions in these cases may, quote, may well violate the free exercise clause, but maintained that the court did not need to decide the serious and difficult question now because the attendance limit no longer applies to the challenger. Kavanaugh countered that there is, quote, no good reason, quote, not to act now. If the houses of worship challenges the restrictions do not return to red or orange zone, he observed, then the court's rulings will impose no harm on the state and have no effect on the state's response to the COVID-19. But if they do end up back in the red or orange zones, the rulings will ensure they are not subject to unconstitutional treatment. So what does that mean in a nutshell? What it means is, hey, government, not just the state of New York and Governor Cuomo, the justices, I think, have had enough. When you are going to affect a fundamental right as guaranteed by the First Amendment of the United States Constitution, you have to have a pretty darn good reason to do so. And right now, those reasons that we've all been listening to for the last 8 months and kind of going along with it, the Supreme Court said enough is enough. And they talked about strict scrutiny. And not to get too far into the weeds, but when the legislature, right, state or Congress at the federal level passes legislation, there's a couple of standards. The first one is a rational basis test, right? If we're going to create a law, there must be some rational basis to do so. And that's the standard for most laws. If there's a reasonable, rational basis for the law, then we're going to do it. Then you have an intermediate scrutiny, and that's a scrutiny where classification is based upon gender. Once again, in that particular standard, the law will be upheld if it is substantially related to an important governmental purpose. It gets a lot tougher to do that. But when you are talking about fundamental constitutional rights, right? Think about it. When you're talking about prohibiting from somebody to engage in the First Amendment protected right of going to church, freedom of assembly, right? It's then a strict scrutiny. The court uses the strict scrutiny standard when a suspect classification or fundamental right is involved. Under the strict scrutiny standard, a law will be upheld only if it is necessary to achieve a compelling and overriding governmental purpose. And the court will always consider whether less burdensome means for accomplishing the legislative goal are available. Most governmental action examined under the strict scrutiny test fails. Why? Because it's a fundamental right, and we're not going to be able to just get rid of people's fundamental rights because we think it's going to help. I've looked through the Constitution, and I welcome you to do it the same. But I have not seen any public pandemic exception in the United States Constitution. The court's going to give you some leeway. You had about 8 months. The challenges are going to come forward, and I think people are going to start to win. Let me know what you think. Do you think the government should have all the power to say, if it would save just one life, wouldn't it be worth it? Or you say, no, we want our freedom, and those who want dangerous freedom are willing to step out and go forward and challenge these restrictions and saying, hey, I think there's less restrictive means available. And oh, by the way, can you actually prove that it's going to make a difference? Most cannot. Now, next on the docket, our dumb criminal contestant of the day. For those of you who have not heard, or maybe not a big Star Wars fan, the actor by the name of Dave Prose died. You say, hey, which one is Dave Prose? He was Darth Vader. He died just the other day at age 85. Needless to say, certainly makes a lot of his memorabilia a little more valuable. Well, guess what? Frank Herbert was arrested Monday night after he allegedly broke into the Bad Robot production building in Santa Monica and made off with Star Wars memorabilia, including Darth Vader's helmet. Cops apparently responded to the scene and were told by security personnel that Hebert had been captured on surveillance video illegally entering the building through the rooftop and casually walked out with a shopping cart full of stuff. Bold move for sure. Once the police quickly found Mr. Hebert, because he was the only guy pushing a cart down the street not too far away, and which just happened to be full of Star Wars stuff, he was promptly arrested. Cops say underneath a mountain of Star Wars pillows, there were 2 helmets, Darth's iconic black one and a Stormtrooper helmet as well. They arrested him and Hebert was booked on felony non-residential burglary. He posed for his mugshot. Take a look at that guy. The helmets were returned to the rightful owner. Mr. Hebert, you are a dumb criminal contestant of the day, which makes you eligible for the dumb criminal contestant of the week. Don't break into places that have security cameras and then just stroll out with all your loot in a shopping cart. Shame on you, Mr. Hebert. Now, something that has never taken place before. We have counted the votes, not once, but twice. That's right, 3 times. And something that has never happened before in our dumb criminal contestant winner of the week last week, it was a 3-way tie. Sometimes you just have to accept the results. Either way, I am not going to do a tiebreaker. Every one of our dumb criminal contestants winners from last week will receive a mug. Now, if you want Crime Talk merch and you don't want to become a dumb criminal contestant, simply go to the link below for Teespring. Get whatever you want. I'm telling you, Christmas is coming. You deserve it. You deserve it. Get your Crime Talk merch now, whether it's leggings, a mug, a t-shirt, a sweatshirt. What would make your day on Christmas Day than waking up with me in the form of a coffee mug? Go to the link below. Get your coffee mug today. Thank you for watching. I hope you all had a wonderful Thanksgiving. We are back in the saddle again here at Crime Talk. We are 100% cured. Have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow on Crime Talk.